Good morning, good afternoon. My Portuguese is not so good, so I'm going to go today in English, but I'll try to speak slowly, and hopefully this stuff will be useful and very much build on the last couple of talks that you heard. Great. Great. So I put this picture to start because I think this is your consumer. This is most consumers. They're confused. Which product or service should I use? Should I pick one bank or another bank? Should I use one particular credit card or a different credit card? Should I use a certain service or another service? How do I know which of the things that are out there I should be using? And if you take a look at yourself or others, most people don't listen to advertisements, they listen to word of mouth. As we'll talk about in the next 30 minutes or so, word of mouth has over 10 times as effectiveness as traditional advertising in changing behavior. Not lots of nice videos shown in the last few talks that have gone viral, but to get word of mouth to work for us, to make videos viral, to get consumers talking about our products, our ideas, our brands, we have to understand why people talk about some things rather than others. It's not just enough to say this video did well. For us to make a video do well, or for us to get people to talk about our brands, we have to understand why, what makes people pass certain things on. And so here are 3 products or brands that are probably reasonably familiar to the folks in the audience. On the far left, we have Walt Disney World. Everybody knows Disney World, yes? Yeah, quite famous. Yeah, good. The one in the middle is Honey Nut Cheerios. It's basically a breakfast cereal. In the United States, it's a popular breakfast cereal. And the last one is Scrubbing Bubbles. It's a bathroom cleaner. Now, I've run this exercise hundreds of times at this point and asked thousands of people which of these 3 brands do they think gets the most word of mouth. And again, people say, oh, this is obvious. It's Disney World, right? Disney World obviously gets more word of mouth than a breakfast cereal. Why would anyone talk about a breakfast cereal? It's really, really boring. Why would anyone talk about a bathroom cleaner? It's really, really boring. But actually, if you look at the data, Cheerios gets more word of mouth than Disney World. The breakfast cereal gets talked more about than a big brand that we're all probably quite familiar with and seems very exciting and seems very lively. And so what I think that points out is we don't always understand why some things get talked about more than others. And without that understanding, it's hard to get our own products and ideas to catch on. So as a brief introduction, I'm Jonah Berger. I'm a marketing professor at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. And today I'm going to give you a brief tour through some of the highlights of my recent New York Times bestseller and Wall Street Journal bestseller, Contagious: Why Things Catch On. This book is not out, unfortunately, in Brazil yet, but it's coming out, I believe, in the next couple months, but it is available on Amazon. And so this book is all about the science behind word of mouth and viral and social transmission. How can we understand why people share things and use that to get our own things to catch on and become popular? So it's probably pretty obvious to most of the audience, but in case it's not, word of mouth is really, really important. I teach at the Wharton School. Wharton students love quotes from McKinsey, the famous consulting firm, so here's a nice McKinsey quote. But word of mouth generates more than twice the sales of paid advertising in all sorts of categories. Whether you're talking about skincare or mobile phones, whether you're talking about online versus offline, any dimension of the financial sector, as well as B2B and services, word of mouth is much more impactful. Just think about the last movie you saw, the last product you bought, the last vacation you went on. Most of these things you heard about from your friends. And if you look at the data, what it shows is that word of mouth is over 10 times as effective as traditional advertising. 10 times more effective. Does anyone have any idea why word of mouth is so much more effective? I heard somebody say trust, right? So you can think about an ad. When you see an ad, what's the first thing you do? You say, there's no way that product is as good as they say it is in the ad. Because the ads always say the product is great. The ads always say 9 out of 10 dentists like this toothpaste, or we give the movie 5 stars, go see it again. The ad never says this restaurant isn't good. It always says it's the best restaurant ever, you have to go. And so consumers have been trained to react against ads. Whenever we see an ad, we say, well, there's no way that the product is as good as they say it is. They don't believe what they see in an ad. Whereas word of mouth, well, we tend to listen to our friends. If our friend says a product is pretty good, we're going to believe them because sometimes they'll say it's good and sometimes they'll say it's bad. And so we can actually trust what they have to say. So the first benefit of word of mouth is trust. The second one is a little more nuanced, and that's the targeting benefit of word of mouth. So think about whatever business you're in. How do you find new customers? How do you find new potential clients or consumers or individuals to buy your product or idea? Well, often we take out advertisements, right? We say, okay, I'll take out an advertisement in a publication that I think lots of people that might be interested in my product or idea might read, or on a television show that lots of those people might watch, or maybe I buy a digital ad. I look at demographics and I say, which website should my ad be on? And I try to target it that way. But if you look at that data, that's not very effective. Because the problem is you may be in a publication that people that like that sort of product like, but they may not be in the market for that product. I used to work at Capital One a number of years ago, and Capital One would always advertise in certain places or send consumers credit cards in the mail, hoping that they would open those credit cards and buy them. But they didn't know when consumers wanted the credit card. They would just send them in the mail once every week, hoping to eventually get there right when the consumer needed a card. Because as a marketer, you don't have a good idea of what exact products all consumers need. You have a guess, but you don't know for sure. Nobody knows someone better than their friends. Think about how well you know your friends, or how well your friends know you. They have a really good sense of what products or ideas or things that you're interested in. They can target much more effectively than marketers can. A great example of this happened to me a few years ago. So companies often send academics books in the mail, professors books in the mail, hoping that we'll assign them to our classes. So hey, we'll send you a book, you'll read it, you'll enjoy it, you'll assign it to all your students. But this time they actually sent me 2 copies of the same book. Exact same book, 2 copies. So why 2 copies? Right, the second book is the same as the first, why a second copy? Well, they put a little note that said, hey, Professor Berger, we think you'll like this book, but we also think you'll know someone else who will like this book. Please pass the second copy on to them. And that was the marketer using their customers to help them find new customers, to do the targeting for them, almost like a searchlight that goes through a social network to find the person or people that'll find that product or idea more interesting. That's why referred customers, people that come in through existing customers, and I study done by a colleague of mine at the Wharton School, found that referred customers at a bank, people that came in through existing customers, had 13% higher customer lifetime value than people who came off the street. They're better customers because people find the person they know that's most interested in that product. Because people tend to be friends with other people like them, right? If you play golf, you don't play golf alone. You play golf with other people that play golf. If you like indie rock music, you go to shows with other people that like the same thing. And so if you're a small business and you need a new loan, you probably know other people that need a new small business loan. If you're into credit cards, you probably know someone else who knows and is interested in credit cards. And so by using your customer or consumer to do the targeting for you, you get much better people coming in the door. Okay, so hopefully by now it's clear that word of mouth is really effective. It's very important, whether online or off. Now let's think about how do we get it. Right? We know it's worthwhile. How do we make it work for us? And so in most cases, when people think about word of mouth, they think about online word of mouth. Things like Facebook, things like Twitter, things like blogs, things like online reviews, LinkedIn, and the like. If you had to guess, what percent from 0 to 100 of all word of mouth is online? From 0 to 100, what percent do you think is online? Somebody want to, I hear some mumbles, but I'm not. Someone want to stick a hand up and take a guess? From 0 to 100, what percent of all word of mouth is online? 20? 50? Anybody else? 80? It's 7. Not 7D, not 17, 7. Yes, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right? A very small percent of word of mouth is online. Now, that doesn't mean online's not important. Online is very important. And you can do some targeting things online, and it's easier to share things often online than having to remember a story. And it's easy to click on a link. If someone shares a link, it's easy to purchase from that link. But the problem is by focusing so much online, people forgot about offline. Most word of mouth is offline. There was a nice break prior to the couple talks ago, and I saw a bunch of you milling outside. Some of you on your phones, but most of you talked face to face. You looked one each other in the eye and you talked about something. And those things that you're talking about are going to affect each other's behavior later. And the second problem with focusing so much online is we focus on the technology rather than psychology. So about 5 years ago, there was a really popular website called MySpace. And businesses were told, you need to get on MySpace, you need to figure out how to use MySpace to grow your business. And now MySpace isn't so popular. Facebook and Twitter are popular today. I don't know whether they'll be popular in a year. In the United States, Pinterest is getting really big. Foursquare used to be big. I don't know if these technologies will stick around or not. But what I do know is that people will share regardless of what technology they're using. It's not like the first time someone shared was because the internet was invented. The first act of word of mouth was one caveman sort of nudging another and saying, don't eat that, right? It's poisonous. Or let's go hunt over there. The animals are slow and they're easy to catch. Most word of mouth is face-to-face, and let's think about the psychology rather than the technology, why people share, and how we can use that to help our own ideas catch on. So you might have thought it's all about luck. So particularly with viral videos, if you look around and you ask people, why do videos go viral? They go, oh yeah, it's luck. It's random. It's chance. You got to get lucky. You play a roulette rule. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And that's a really good story, except it's completely and utterly wrong. It doesn't tell us anything why some things succeed and others fail. And so instead of thinking about luck or chance, I want to talk about science. So I spent the last 10 years studying why products, ideas, and behaviors catch on, why online content goes viral, why brands get more word of mouth. We've looked at hundreds of videos, thousands of brands, and millions of car purchases across the United States. And we found again and again, and it wasn't luck and it wasn't chance. There's a science or a formula behind why things catch on. And if we understand that formula, we can build it into our own products or ideas and craft contagious content. Now let me be clear, what I don't mean to suggest is that I can guarantee 10 million views for your next video. What I can suggest is you'll get more people to share that piece of content than you would otherwise. If you could get each of your customers to tell just one additional customer, you'd be really happy. Sure, you'd love a video that has 7 million views, but what you really want is more customers. And what you need to do is turn those customers into advocates. Use the science behind word of mouth to get people to talk about and share your ideas and use them to help your brand grow. And so those 6 key things are the 6 key steps I'll talk about briefly today. So it's social currency, triggers, emotion, public, practical value, and stories. And for those in the audience who are wondering why I spelled steps incorrectly, it's because I'm not very clever. I couldn't figure out a better acronym for these 6 ideas. But I think this will help you remember what those 6 are and think about how to apply them. And so each of these is a psychological principle that drives a human motivation, that drives how we behave, and by applying that motivation, we can help our own products and ideas catch on. Not only the content we build, so let's say we design an ad or we design a video to go online, how we can craft that, but also how we build the product itself. How we design, let's say, features of the product, or how we design a user experience so that people are more likely to talk about it. If we build these features in, we can craft more contagious content. And I think this is a really important approach because sometimes we think more about the messenger rather than the message. There's this notion out there that if we just find those influential people, 1 out of 10 people influences the whole rest of the population. And that's a great idea, except that it's wrong. There's no data to back up that idea, right? There are many people that have a small number of friends rather than have gazillions of friends. If you look on Twitter, there are some famous celebrities that have millions and millions of followers. But if you look, almost no one has actually bought something because that celebrity bought it. Right? They may have learned about it, but they didn't buy it from that person. They're more likely to trust their friends. And so we need to think more about the message and less about the messenger. How we can design things that anyone will share, whether they have 10 friends or 10,000. So let me spend the next 15, 20 minutes or so talking a little bit about the STEPS framework and introducing some of the ideas. And I'm going to tell some stories because I think that'll help us understand how these things work. Is anyone from New York here or been to New York recently? Couple people? Okay. So imagine you're on a business trip to New York. You're on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and you're looking for something to eat. You're sort of hungry. You want to find a place to grab a bite to eat. When you notice a sign outside a restaurant that looks like a big hot dog with the words "Eat Me" written on it in what look like mustard. So you say, I haven't had a hot dog in a while, so I'll go check this place out. So you walk down a flight of stairs into a restaurant called Criff Dogs. Now, if you like hot dogs or sausages or meat of any sort, you'll love this restaurant. They have a hot dog wrapped in bacon with eggs and cheese, a little bit rough on the stomach, but interesting nonetheless. They have a hot dog with green onion and pineapple, also sort of interesting, but also quite tasty, and a traditional hot dog with just ketchup and mustard. So you're sitting there, you're munching on your hot dog, when you notice something unusual in the corner of the room, a phone booth. Right? One of those things that Clark Kent might jump into to change into Superman, or used to be on the street corners with a payphone in it. So just for fun, slide open that door and walk inside. It'll be sort of cramped in there, hard to move, right? It's a pretty tight space. But on the wall, you'll notice an old rotary dial phone. One of those phones you stick your finger in and you go around in a circle to dial. So just for fun, stick your finger in, let's say, the number 6, go around in a circle, and hold the receiver up to your ear. The phone will go ring, ring, and then someone will pick up the other line, and they'll ask you if you have a reservation. Reservation? I'm in a phone booth inside of a hot dog restaurant. What would I have a reservation for? But if you're lucky and you have a reservation, or there's space, the back of that phone booth will open, and you'll be led into a secret bar called Please Don't Tell. Now, Please Don't Tell has violated a number of traditional laws of marketing, right? No sign on the street, no sign inside the restaurant. They've done everything they can to make themselves difficult to find. Yet they've never advertised, and every day they're full. At 3 p.m., the phone lines open up. By 3:30, all the seats are gone. Extremely, extremely popular. How did they get that way? Well, they did something interesting. They made themselves a secret. And let me tell you a little secret about secrets. Think about the last time someone told you a secret, and they told you not to tell anybody else. What's the first thing you did with that information? You told somebody, right? Because knowing something that not everyone else knows makes you look smart, makes you look special, makes you look in the know. It gives you something I'll call social currency. Just like the car we drive and the clothes we wear, the things we say affect how other people see us. Right? Driving a flashy car may make people think you're rich. Wearing certain types of clothes may make people think you're fashionable. Same with what you talk about. People are always talking about new restaurants. People think they're a foodie. People are always talking about hot technology. Other people assume they know a lot about that. And so one way to get people to talk about our stuff is to make them look good while they're talking about us. So let me share with you a couple ways to do that. So the first is to do what Please Don't Tell did, which is to make people feel like insiders, like they're part of a special club that not everyone else has access to. LinkedIn also did a great job of this a few months ago. So they sent an email out to a number of people who use their service saying, you have one of the top profiles on the website. Your profile is one of the top 5% or 10% most influential profiles on the site. Imagine you got that email. People got that email. They felt pretty good. They patted themselves on the back. But they didn't just feel good. They shared it with everyone they knew. And why did they share it? Well, they shared it because it made them look good, right? But notice that along the way, LinkedIn got to come along for the ride. By making the people look good and being the reason that the people look good, the people said, look at me, I'm fantastic, I'm popular on LinkedIn. But along the way, they had to mention the brand that made them look good. And so the first way to get social currency is to make people feel special, smart, and in the know. Scarcity and exclusivity are great with this. If you look at what Apple does whenever they come out with a new product, right? It's really scarce, it's exclusive, it's hard to get, so everybody really wants it. And when they get it, they can't wait to show everybody else, look at me, look at this great thing that I got. So the first way is to make people feel like insiders. And I've done some work with Vanguard, which is a big 401k provider in the United States. They did something really simple to make people feel like insiders. They used to call their clients, their customers, clients. And they said, well, that's not very special, right? That sounds like we're over here and the client's over here. And now they're going to call them members, right? You're not a client, you're a member. Suddenly you feel like you're part of something that's bigger than you. Makes you feel good about yourself, makes you like the brand more, and makes you more likely to talk about it. The second way to apply social currency is to find the inner remarkability. And by remarkability, I mean things that are worthy of remark, worthy of mention, whether they're surprising, whether they're novel, or whether they're interesting. And you might think, well, certain products are naturally remarkable and other products are really boring. So what's a product you might say is really boring, very mundane, not very remarkable? Cheerios? Yeah. You could say toilet paper, right? Dish soap? Rice, right? Rice wouldn't be a very remarkable product. Same with a dishwasher or maybe a blender. Let me show you how a company got over 150 million views for videos about blenders.
Will it blend? That is the question.
How many people have seen one of these videos? A couple people, okay.
I love my new iPhone. It does everything. But will it blend? That is the question. Let's find out. I think I'm going to push the smoothie button. I smoke. Don't breathe this. Now, you fans on YouTube have asked me to blend an iPhone, so I did it. But I have another. I'm going to put this on eBay.
How many people found that at least a little bit remarkable? Just at least a little bit, right? Yeah, I heard some people go, wow, that's amazing. This is a pretty neat example. This video has over 10 million views. The set has over 200 million. Sales went up over 700% after these videos came out. But the part that I think is the neatest for me about this is they did this for blenders. One of the most boring, mundane products any of us can think of, right? And so if they can do this for blenders, we can do this for rice or toilet paper or anything else. We need to find the inner remarkability behind that product or idea. Some things are naturally more remarkable and others are less so, but they figured out how to make a blender remarkable by showing people what was remarkable about it. And so as marketers, we're really used to telling people all about the features that we have and how great they are, but we need to show them, visually show them what we're providing them in a remarkable way that will get them to share. Okay, so that's social currency. And I want to talk about triggers for just a couple minutes. And to do that, I want to talk about a famous song that some of you may be familiar with. How many people are familiar with Rebecca Black's song, Friday? Okay. Can I play a quick clip of that for those who don't know it? I think, let's see if this works.
This is a demonstration of flip format.
Catch my bus, I see my friends kicking in the front seat, sitting in the back seat. Gotta make my mind up, which seat can I take? It's Friday, Friday, gotta get down on Friday.
Okay. So if you thought the song was terrible, you're not alone. Some people have called this the worst song ever. Which is in itself an accomplishment if you could really make the worst song ever. It was made by a girl named Rebecca Black. Her parents paid $4,000 to a company to come up with a hit for her. They came out with this overproduced number about those big teenage dilemmas like waking up in the morning, going to school, and figuring out whether to sit in the front seat or the back seat of your friend's car, right? Really hefty stuff. People hate this video, yet it has over 300 million views. 300 million. And so if so many people hate it, why is it doing so well? Right? Why is Rebecca Black's song Friday doing so well? Well, with the help of actually Google search, I was able to get some data on this. So YouTube and Google have a really nice engine where you can type in any phrase and look at the search data, the volume of that data over time. And so what this figure is the volume of people searching for the term Rebecca Black over time. What do you see? Well, you see a spike in attention, and then it goes down, and then you see another spike, and then it goes down, and another spike, and then it goes down, and another spike, and then it goes down. If you look closer, though, those spikes aren't random. They're every 7 days. And if you look even closer, you'll notice that they're every Friday, which is the same name as Rebecca Black's song. Now, this song is equally bad every day of the week. It's bad on Monday, it's bad on Tuesday, it's bad on Wednesday, it's bad on Thursday, and it's bad on Friday. But Friday provides a ready reminder, what psychologists would call a trigger, to make people think about and talk about and share the song. Because if something is top of mind, it's going to be tip of tongue. Right? Even if you don't like something, why do we talk so often about the weather? The weather's not the most interesting thing in the world, but we're often thinking about it, so we talk about it more. And so the second letter in the framework is, how do we remind people about our products or ideas? How do we use the environment to do that? So Cheerios, for example, you might say, who would talk about Cheerios? Well, this is the mentions on Cheerios on Twitter by time of day. So midnight, 2 a.m., 4 a.m., 6 a.m. What you notice is that people talk about Cheerios when they eat breakfast. They're using the product is top of mind, and now they're more likely to talk about it. It shifts to the right a little bit on the weekend, right? A little bit later on the weekend. Why? Because people eat breakfast later on the weekend. When people use a product, the product is much more top of mind, and they're more likely to discuss it with their friends. But you might say, well, hold on, what if my product isn't used very often? How do I make sure that people think about it and talk about it? And so there are other triggers that also drive talking. So there's a famous old slogan that Michelob had, weekends are made for Michelob. The idea was they wanted people to think about the beer every time the weekend rolled around. Think about it on the weekend, more likely to come online, more likely to talk about it. Same thing with Corona. I don't know if you've ever been on a beach vacation. You're lying there on the beach, you have your suntan lotion on. Suddenly Corona pops to mind as what you might want to drink, right? Because they've associated themselves with the beach. So what you need to think about is how can you pick something in the environment that when consumers see it, they think about you. Every time they see it, you come to mind, and then they're more likely to talk about you. Kit Kat did a great job of this a few years ago. So sales were down by about 30%. They had to come up with a new strategy. So they came up with a very simple advertisement called Kit Kat and Coffee. Every time you think about coffee, think about Kit Kat. Have a coffee break, think about Kit Kat. Now, what's the good thing if you're going to pick something to link yourself to? Why is coffee a good trigger to link yourself to? Because people drink it every day. It's a frequent trigger. If you're Rebecca Black, don't come out with a song called Leap Day, right? Leap day, something, something, leap day. I won't sing anymore, I promise. People would think about that song once every few years, but not very often. Whereas Friday, they'll think about once a week, every week. Same with Kit Kat and coffee. That Michelob slogan, weekends are made for Michelob, was originally holidays are made for Michelob. But they moved it to the weekend because the weekend is more frequent. Okay, so that's triggers. I don't have enough time to talk about emotion in depth, but the idea of emotion is when we care, we share. The more we're emotionally involved in something, the more likely we are to pass it on. And so there's a whole chapter on that in Contagious if you want to learn which emotions increase sharing and which emotions decrease sharing. And by the way, it's not just a positive increase and negative decrease. It's more complicated than that. But you can learn about the emotions that affect sharing. Public is also another important factor in terms of making something publicly visible. And to talk about this, I want to remind us, remember the portable CD player? You used to have to run in place like this while you were listening to music so it wouldn't skip. You sort of had to decide, do I want to listen to music or do I want to exercise, but I can't do both at once? Okay, and then a new product came out called the digital music player. But it was about $350, and people had to decide, well, do I want to stick with what I have or do I want to do something new? There's always a risk in doing something new. This is an issue marketers have all the time. How can we get people to switch? And the problem at the time was that all the headphones were black. Whether you had a Sony product or a Kobe product, whatever it was, had black headphones. So you had no idea what product someone else was using. But then Apple comes out with white headphones. And now if you're on the street, you're on the subway, or on the bus, you see someone with white headphones, and the next week you see 2 people with white headphones, next a few more, suddenly you go, wow, that product must be pretty good. Maybe I should adopt it as well. If something's publicly visible, it's easier to imitate. That old phrase, monkey see, monkey do. If we can see what other people are doing, we can imitate it. I also don't have a huge amount of time to talk about practical value either because I want to get to stories, but practical value is all about news and information we can use. So how you highlight information to make it more valuable, whether it's best types of sunscreen, healthy foods you should eat, framing information in a way that gets people to pass it on, and also how to frame discounts. The same discount, the same amount of money off, can be more or less impactful depending on if it's framed as an amount of money, dollars off, or percentage off. Right? Those different ways of framing discounts can actually change how impactful they are, even though they're the same economic value. And so I talk about that in the practical value chapter. But I want to wrap up by spending just a couple minutes on stories. Marketers are really bad at telling stories. We have a tendency all the time to be selling. We say, hey, buy our product. No, really, buy our product. Why haven't you bought our product yet? I'm serious. No, buy our product. Right? We're so used to selling, we're not used to storytelling. But stories are the currency of conversation. And so we need to figure out how to wrap our brand or our message in a story, right? If you think about, I'll skip this one actually. If you think about Will It Blend and what Will It Blend did, that nice blender where they blended an iPhone, that was a really engaging piece of content, but you also learned something about the blender. What did you learn? Notice what you learned. You can't share that ad without realizing that is a really tough blender because it can tear through a phone. And so they didn't just build an engaging piece of content, they built a story. But they built what I'll call a Trojan horse story. Does everyone remember the story of the Trojan horse? The Greeks versus the Trojans, they build that wooden horse, they hide inside. Good content is like a story that carries a message inside. Right? In the case of Will It Blend, it carries the message that we have a really tough blender. Right? In other cases, it can carry a message about the brand, but the story does the showing. By showing that story, by listening to that story, you take home the message without having someone to act like a walking advertisement. No one's going to say, they'll tell their friend, this is a really tough blender. But they will say, wow, look at this blender that's amazing that cut through an iPhone, and along the way, people learn the benefit. So thinking about how to build a Trojan horse story is really important. Vanguard has done a great job of this. So Vanguard built this truck called the At Cost Cafe. Vanguard wants to remind people that they have low fees on their various financial offerings. So they built this thing where they offer coffee at cost, 26 cents a cup. Now, people love getting coffee for very cheap. That's $0.25 in the United States. Very cheap coffee. It's probably about 10% of what it usually costs to get coffee. So people go to this truck and they talk about, oh my God, I went to this truck that was so cheap. And someone will say, well, why was it cheap? And they say, well, Vanguard was showing that, you know, if you offer it at cost, it's really inexpensive. That's the message that Vanguard wants to get across. No one's going to say Vanguard has really good offerings, but they will say this amazing coffee truck at cost. And that helps show people the message in the form of a story. So just to wrap up, we talked today about the 6 key steps, and I'm sorry we only had 30 minutes to do it, but please check out the book. I think you'll find it useful. We talked about social currency, making people look good, smart, and in the know, that hidden bar. We talked about triggers. If something is top of mind, it'll be tip of tongue. We talked about emotion. The more we care, the more likely we are to share. We talked about public. If it's publicly visible, if it's easier to see, easier to imitate. Practical value is useful information. Finally, wrapping these things in stories or narratives. Stories are the currency of conversation, and they carry brands forward. I'll skip this part because we're at time, and thank you guys very much.